There are moments in life that divide everything into two chapters: the life you thought you had, and the life you discover was never real in the first place. For Emily Carter, that moment arrived on a warm spring evening in Los Angeles, inside one of the most elegant ballrooms in the country, while 600 people stood on their feet applauding a woman they believed had everything. The Beverly Hilton had hosted presidents, Academy Award winners, and some of the most influential business leaders in America. Tonight, its grand ballroom had been transformed into a celebration of innovation, leadership, and perseverance. Crystal chandeliers shimmered overhead, casting a soft golden glow across white linen tables decorated with fresh orchids and candlelight. A string quartet played quietly near the stage, while photographers moved through the room, capturing smiles that looked effortless under the lights. For most people in attendance, this was simply another awards gala, another evening of speeches, networking, and polished conversations. For Emily, it represented 15 years of sacrifice condensed into a single night. At 34 years old, Emily Carter had built Carter Design Group from a tiny architectural studio with 2 employees into one of the fastest-growing sustainable design firms in California. She had never inherited wealth. She had never benefited from powerful connections. Every opportunity she earned had come from years of relentless work, impossible deadlines, sleepless nights, and an unwavering refusal to quit when quitting would have been the easier choice. Business magazines loved to describe her as fearless. Her employees preferred a different word: authentic. Emily never believed leadership meant having all the answers. She believed it meant showing up every morning, even when you were exhausted, admitting when you were wrong, and making sure the people who trusted you always felt valued. It was a philosophy that turned employees into loyal teammates and clients into lifelong partners. As she sat near the front of the ballroom, she gently ran her fingers along the edge of the crystal water glass in front of her. It wasn't nervousness that occupied her mind. In fact, she felt surprisingly calm. She had already accepted that winning or losing tonight wouldn't define her career. Simply being nominated alongside leaders she had admired for years already felt like an extraordinary honor. Still, there was one thing she couldn't stop thinking about. She looked toward the ballroom entrance. The heavy double doors opened as another group of guests entered. For a split second, hope flickered across her face. Then it disappeared just as quickly. It wasn't Daniel. Emily lowered her eyes and smiled to herself, trying to dismiss the disappointment before anyone noticed. Los Angeles traffic had a way of turning 15-minute drives into hour-long nightmares. Daniel had texted her earlier, apologizing and promising he'd arrive before her category was announced. She had no reason to doubt him. That's the thing about trust. It isn't built through grand romantic gestures. It's built through hundreds of ordinary moments when someone consistently does exactly what they say they're going to do. Daniel had always been that person. At least, that's what Emily believed. Her phone rested face down beside her program booklet. She resisted the urge to check it again. It had only been 3 minutes since the last time she looked, and she already knew what she'd find. No new messages. Across the table, her executive assistant, Megan, leaned closer with an excited smile. "You know, half the room already thinks you've won, right?" Emily laughed softly. "That's exactly why I don't want to think about it." "You should think about it," Megan replied. "I've watched you work 18-hour days for 5 years. If anyone deserves this award, it's you." Emily appreciated the compliment, but praise still made her uncomfortable. She thanked Megan, took a sip of sparkling water, and glanced toward the entrance once more. Nothing. The orchestra finished another piece as conversations gradually quieted.
The master of ceremonies walked confidently onto the stage, welcomed everyone to the National Leadership Excellence Awards, and began recognizing sponsors. Around the room, waiters quietly collected dinner plates, while cameras slowly panned across the audience, projecting smiling faces on the giant screens beside the stage. Emily noticed none of it. Her attention kept drifting back to the empty chair reserved for Daniel. She remembered helping him choose his tuxedo only the night before. He had stood in front of the bedroom mirror, pretending to model it like a movie star, making her laugh so hard she nearly spilled her coffee. He had wrapped his arms around her behind and looked at her reflection in the mirror. "Tomorrow's your night," he'd said. "I'm going to be the loudest person in that ballroom." She could still hear the confidence in his voice. She could still picture the smile. It didn't feel rehearsed. It didn't feel dishonest. It felt real. Which is why, even now, she wasn't angry that he was late. She was worried. Not dramatically worried, just enough to make her check her phone one more time. She unlocked the screen. The last message still sat at the top of their conversation. "Traffic is awful. I'll be there before your category starts. Save me a seat. Love you." Emily smiled without realizing it. She typed a quick reply. "Everything okay?" Before she could press send, the ballroom lights dimmed another level, signaling that the first major awards were about to begin. She locked the phone again and slipped it back onto the table. "Here we go," Megan whispered. Emily inhaled slowly and folded her hands together beneath the table. She wasn't praying to win. She was simply grateful to have reached a place in life where moments like this were possible. 15 years earlier, she had worked alone in a rented office with second-hand furniture and a laptop that crashed almost every afternoon. There were weeks when she wondered if she would have enough money to pay her employees. More than once, she had skipped paying herself so someone else wouldn't have to worry about rent. Nobody in this ballroom knew those stories. They saw the polished version, the successful CDO, the magazine covers, the interviews, the elegant dress. Very few people ever see the years that make success possible. The applause began again as another award winner was announced. Emily joined in, smiling sincerely for a woman she had admired for years. She reminded herself to stay present, to enjoy the evening regardless of the outcome. Then her phone vibrated just once. The vibration was so subtle that nobody else at the table seemed to notice. Emily glanced down automatically, expecting Daniel's name to appear across the screen. Instead, the notification read, "Unknown number." For a second, she assumed it was a congratulations message from someone in the industry. She opened it. There was only one sentence: "Congratulations on making it this far." Emily frowned slightly. It was an odd way to phrase a compliment. Before she had time to think about it, another message arrived. This one wasn't text, it was a photograph. Emily stared at the screen without touching it. Something deep inside her, a feeling she couldn't explain, told her not to open it. On stage, the presenter smiled as she reached for the envelope containing the next award winner. Emily's thumb hovered over the image, and, without realizing it, she made the decision that would divide her life into before and after.
Emily stared at the image for what felt like an eternity, even though only a second had passed. Her thumb hovered above the screen, caught between curiosity and fear. She couldn't explain why a simple photograph suddenly felt so heavy, as if opening it would unlock something that could never be put back inside. Around her, the ballroom continued exactly as it had a moment before. Laughter drifted between tables. Crystal glasses clinked together. Camera shutters flashed from every corner of the room. The orchestra quietly transitioned into another piece, while servers slipped between guests with practiced precision. To everyone else, the evening was unfolding perfectly. Emily took a slow breath and tapped the image. For the first second, she didn't understand what she was looking at. The photograph had been taken from across a hotel lobby. It wasn't professionally framed or carefully composed. It looked rushed, almost as if someone had hidden behind a decorative column while taking it. The lighting was dim, but there was no mistaking the man standing near the elevators. Daniel. He was wearing the charcoal gray tuxedo she had helped him choose the previous evening. The silver watch on his wrist caught the light exactly the way it always did. Even from a distance, she recognized the way he stood with one hand casually in his pocket. He wasn't alone. Standing beside him was a woman Emily had never seen before. She appeared to be around 30, with shoulder-length blonde hair, wearing a fitted black evening dress beneath a beige trench coat. She wasn't standing beside Daniel the way strangers stood beside each other while waiting for an elevator. She was standing close. Too close. Daniel leaned toward her slightly, his expression relaxed, comfortable, familiar. Emily instinctively zoomed in on the photograph, searching for some detail that would explain everything away. Maybe she was a client. Maybe they had run into each other unexpectedly. Maybe the angle made them appear closer than they actually were. Her heartbeat slowed as her mind desperately searched for ordinary explanations. Then, another message appeared. "Look at his left hand." Emily frowned and enlarged the image again. At first, she couldn't see anything unusual. Then, she noticed it. Daniel's hand rested gently against the woman's lower back. Not by accident. Not for balance. The gesture was subtle, almost invisible unless someone pointed it out. It was also unmistakably intimate. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. No. The word escaped under her breath before she realized she had spoken aloud. Megan glanced toward her from across the table. "You okay?" Emily forced herself to look up, quickly locking the screen before anyone else could see it. "Yeah," she answered, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Just one of those spam messages." Megan smiled sympathetically and returned her attention to the stage. Emily's hands, however, had begun to tremble. This couldn't be real. Daniel wasn't capable of this. He had spent years proving exactly the opposite. Every anniversary, every birthday, every difficult season of her career, he had been there. Every time she doubted herself, Daniel had been the one reminding her why she started. Every success they celebrated had felt shared. Their marriage wasn't perfect, no marriage was, but it was honest. At least, she had believed it was. The phone vibrated again. Another image. Emily closed her eyes for a second before opening it. This photograph had been taken only moments after the first. Daniel and the same woman were now walking toward a private hallway leading away from the hotel lobby. The timestamp in the corner froze Emily's thoughts. 7:36 p.m. Emily immediately unlocked her conversation with Daniel. His last message. "Traffic is awful. I'll be there before your category starts. Save me a seat. Love you." Timestamp. 7:34 p.m. She stared at both screens. According to his message, he was stuck on the freeway. According to the photograph, 2 minutes later, he was already inside another hotel. Her mind refused to connect the pieces. It searched desperately for another explanation. Could the timestamps be faked? Could someone have edited the images? Could artificial intelligence create something this convincing? She enlarged the second photograph until the pixels began to break apart. Daniel's face, the tuxedo, the watch, even the tiny scar above his right eyebrow from a skiing accident years earlier. Every detail matched. Nothing looked manipulated.
Nothing looked artificial. The master of ceremonies' voice echoed through the ballroom. And now, ladies and gentlemen, applause swept through the room. Our finalists for the National Leadership Excellence Award. Emily barely heard him. She looked around the ballroom again. Who had sent these? Why tonight? Why not yesterday? Why not tomorrow? Whoever was behind the messages knew exactly where she was, exactly what tonight meant, exactly when Daniel was supposed to arrive. Which meant one thing. This wasn't random. Someone had planned this. The presenter smiled as she accepted a sealed envelope from one of the event organizers. Emily's phone vibrated again. One final message. She hesitated before opening it. If you still believe he's in traffic, don't accept the award. Walk out of the ballroom. Go to the Grand Crescent Hotel, Suite 1812. You'll find your answer there. Emily's pulse thundered in her ears. The Grand Crescent Hotel stood less than 2 blocks away. She knew it well. Her company had hosted conferences there more than once. It was close enough to reach on foot in under 5 minutes. The presenter broke the seal on the envelope. Emily looked toward the empty chair beside her one last time. It was still empty. For the first time all evening, she stopped hoping Daniel would walk through those doors. Instead, she began wondering what she would do if he never did. The presenter smiled at the audience. And the recipient of this year's National Leadership Excellence Award. Emily's name had not yet been spoken, but at that moment, winning no longer felt like the most important thing that could happen that night.
By Thursday afternoon, Carter Design Group had settled into the organized chaos that always came before a major deadline. Phones rang without interruption. Designers leaned over scale models discussing last-minute revisions. Engineers debated structural calculations in front of giant digital displays, while project managers hurried from one conference room to another, carrying coffee cups and overflowing folders. From the outside, it looked exhausting. Inside, it felt alive. Emily wouldn't have wanted it any other way. She moved confidently across the studio floor, stopping every few steps to answer a question, review a drawing, or encourage someone who looked overwhelmed. She never rushed people, even when her own schedule left almost no room to breathe. As she passed one workstation, a nervous intern quickly stood up. "I'm really sorry. I think I ruined the Riverside presentation." Emily walked over and looked at the rendering on his monitor. The young man had accidentally replaced the final client version with an earlier draft. The mistake would have been embarrassing if no one had noticed before tomorrow's meeting. Instead of raising her voice, Emily pulled a chair beside him. "Tell me what happened." He hesitated. I saved over the wrong file." "Can you fix it?" "Yes." "How long?" "Maybe 15 minutes?" Emily smiled. "Then you didn't ruin anything." The young man's shoulders relaxed. She pointed toward the screen. "Real disasters take longer than 15 minutes to fix." A few nearby employees laughed quietly. The tension disappeared. As Emily stood, she gently tapped the corner of the desk. "Next time, you'll make a different mistake." The intern looked confused. She smiled. "And that's called experience." As she walked away, another designer whispered, "I still don't understand how she stays so calm." An older engineer overheard him. "Because she remembers what it felt like to be the newest person in the room." Emily pretended not to hear either comment. Compliments always made her uncomfortable. Constructive criticism, that she could work with.
Her phone vibrated. The screen lit up with a photo of Daniel smiling into the camera, his sunglasses slightly crooked from a hiking trip they had taken the previous summer. She answered almost immediately. "Hey? Please tell me you've eaten lunch." Emily laughed. "Is that your way of saying hello?" "It's my way of making sure my wife doesn't survive on coffee and determination." She looked around the office before lowering her voice. "I had half a salad." "Half? The other half is still waiting for me." "I don't believe you." "You shouldn't." He laughed softly. It was the kind of laugh that always made her smile without realizing it. "I've got something for you." "Oh? But you don't get it until Saturday." "You know I hate surprises." "I know." "Then why do you keep planning them?" "Because you always pretend to hate them." Emily shook her head. "You're impossible." "So I've been told." For a moment, everything felt completely normal, comfortable, safe, exactly the way it had felt for years. Then another call came through. Daniel glanced at his screen. His smile faded for the first time. "I've got to take this." "Everything okay?" A beat of silence. "Yeah, too quickly. I'll call you tonight." Before Emily could ask another question, the line disconnected. She stared at the phone for a second longer than she expected to. Something about his voice had changed. Not frightened, not guilty, just distracted. Megan stepped into her office carrying a garment bag. "Your dress fitting just confirmed." Emily set the phone down. "I'll survive." "Barely." Megan grinned before placing another envelope on the desk. "The awards committee sent tomorrow's itinerary." Emily opened it absent-mindedly. Arrival, press line, reception, dinner, presentation. Everything looked perfectly planned. Her eyes drifted toward the final line. "Guests are encouraged to arrive with spouses or partners." She smiled. Daniel had been looking forward to Saturday almost as much as she had. Across town, Daniel parked outside a quiet cafe. He checked his watch. 3 minutes early. He remained inside the car. Not because he wanted to, because he seemed to be talking himself into getting out. His phone vibrated again. The screen displayed only one sentence. "Are you coming?" He closed his eyes, took one slow breath, then finally stepped out. The camera never shows who is waiting inside the cafe. Only Daniel walking through the door. Only his expression changing the moment he sees the person waiting for him. Not happiness, not fear. Recognition. The door slowly closed behind him.
The sun was beginning its slow descent behind the skyline when Emily finally stepped out of Carter Design Group. The city felt different at this hour. The sharp energy of the business district had softened into something calmer. Office towers reflected shades of orange and gold across their glass facades, while commuters filled the sidewalks with the familiar rhythm of another workday ending. Emily paused for a moment before walking toward the parking garage. She closed her eyes and took a slow breath. Tomorrow would be interviews. The day after that, the biggest night of her career. She should have been thinking about speeches. Instead, she found herself thinking about Daniel. The phone call from earlier replayed quietly in her mind. He hadn't sounded angry or nervous, just preoccupied. She smiled to herself. Maybe he really was planning another surprise. He had never been very good at hiding them. Across the city, Daniel's black sedan rolled slowly into the underground parking garage of an elegant private office building. Unlike the luxury hotel from the anonymous photographs, this building felt almost invisible. No large signs,
No restaurants, no crowds. Only polished concrete walls, private elevators, security cameras. The receptionist recognized him immediately. "Good evening, Mr. Carter." He nodded politely. "I'm expected." She checked a tablet. 24th floor. No questions, no visitor badge, as though this wasn't his first time here. The elevator doors closed. A quiet instrumental piano track played through hidden speakers while the numbers climbed. 8, 14, 20, 24. The elevator doors opened. A single hallway stretched ahead. Every office door remained closed. At the very end, one conference room glowed beneath warm lights. Daniel walked toward it, without hesitation. Inside, 3 people were already waiting. An older attorney wearing a navy suit, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and calm, observant eyes, and a younger financial advisor organizing several folders across a polished walnut table. No one smiled, no one stood. The atmosphere wasn't hostile, it was heavy. The attorney gestured toward the empty chair. "Thank you for coming." Daniel quietly sat down. The attorney slid a thick, sealed envelope across the table. "I wish we were meeting under different circumstances." Daniel looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. "I've been hoping you'd tell me this was all a mistake." The older woman lowered her eyes. "So were we." Silence settled over the room. The financial advisor finally spoke. "We've verified everything 3 separate times." Daniel slowly opened the envelope. The audience never sees what is inside, only Daniel's eyes moving across the pages. His breathing changed, barely, but enough to notice. He leaned back in his chair. "This changes everything." No one disagreed. Miles away, Emily had stopped at a small boutique on her way home. She wandered slowly between shelves filled with leather journals, handmade pens, and engraved keepsakes. She wasn't shopping for herself. She was looking for something Daniel would never expect. The elderly shop owner noticed her studying a display of vintage compasses. "Looking for a gift?" Emily smiled. "My husband's been carrying me through the hardest year of my career." The woman smiled knowingly. "Then don't buy him something expensive." Emily looked up. "Buy him something he'll keep." Several minutes later, Emily walked out carrying a small wrapped box tied with a dark blue ribbon. She looked pleased with herself. Daniel loved meaningful gifts. She hoped this one would surprise him. Back inside the conference room, Daniel closed the envelope. He looked directly at the attorney. "Does Emily know?" The answer came immediately. "No." "Has anyone contacted her?" "No." The older woman folded her hands. "And we'd strongly prefer it stays that way." Daniel stood and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking downtown Los Angeles. Thousands of lights were beginning to appear across the city. Somewhere out there, Emily was probably driving home, completely unaware. "I promised her," he said quietly. "I promised I'd never let anything hurt her." The attorney spoke carefully. Sometimes keeping a promise means telling the truth. Daniel didn't answer. His phone vibrated again. Emily. A photo message. He opened it. It showed a tiny wrapped gift resting on the passenger seat of her car. The caption read, "Can't wait to see your face when you open this." For the first time that evening, Daniel smiled. Not because he was happy, because the message reminded him of everything he was trying to protect. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, turned toward the table, and asked the question he'd been avoiding all afternoon. "If I refuse—" The attorney met his eyes. "You'll only delay it." The room fell silent. Daniel slowly nodded. Outside, Rain began tapping softly against the windows. The older woman reached for the sealed envelope once more. This decision can't wait until after Saturday. Daniel looked down, then quietly said, "I need one more day." No one answered immediately. Finally, the attorney closed his briefcase. "You have until tomorrow evening." Daniel picked up the envelope, held it for a long moment, then walked toward the door. As it closed behind him, the older woman looked toward the attorney. "Do you think he'll tell her?" The attorney sighed. "I think he'll try not to." Daniel stepped back into the empty hallway. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. He pressed the elevator button. The doors opened. As he stepped inside, his reflection stared back at him in the mirrored walls. For the first time, he didn't recognize the man looking back. The elevator doors slowly closed. Cut to black.
By the time Emily pulled into the driveway, the last traces of daylight had disappeared beyond the western hills. The porch lights automatically flickered on, casting a warm glow across the familiar front entrance of the house they had spent years turning into a home. She stayed inside the car for a moment. The wrapped gift rested on the passenger seat beside her, a small wooden compass. Simple, elegant. Daniel had always joked that she was the one who kept him from getting lost. Now, she hoped the gift would remind him that no matter how busy life became, home would always point back to them. She picked up the box, smiled to herself, and walked inside. The house greeted her with silence, not an uncomfortable silence, the peaceful kind, the kind that only existed in places where people felt safe. She placed the gift inside the kitchen pantry behind a stack of serving bowls. Daniel would never think to look there. Satisfied with her hiding place, she laughed quietly to herself. Good luck finding that. Her phone buzzed. Daniel. Running about 20 minutes late, don't wait for dinner. Emily typed back immediately. Too late, I'm already making your favorite. A few seconds later, 3 little dots appeared, then disappeared. No reply. She frowned for only a second before slipping the phone into her pocket. He must be driving. Nearly 30 minutes later, headlights swept across the front windows. Emily looked up from the kitchen. The garage door rumbled open. A moment later, Daniel stepped inside carrying his laptop bag. He looked exhausted. His tie hung slightly loose around his collar. The faint smile on his face seemed genuine, but somehow smaller than usual. Emily walked toward him without saying a word. She wrapped her arms around him. For the briefest moment, he froze. Not because he didn't want the embrace, because it caught him off guard. Then he hugged her back, holding her a little tighter than normal. "You smell like garlic," he said with a tired grin. She laughed. "That's the first thing you say after being gone all day? I'm hoping dinner's involved." "It depends." "On what?" "On whether you're willing to admit I make better pasta than your favorite restaurant." Daniel pretended to think about it. "That's a dangerous question." "So?" "I'll answer after dessert." She rolled her eyes. Coward. For a little while, everything felt normal again. Dinner was loud in all the best ways. Emily talked about the interview requests waiting for her after the award ceremony. She joked about how awkward she felt practicing an acceptance speech for an award she hadn't even won. Daniel listened carefully. He smiled at all the right moments. He asked thoughtful questions. He laughed when she laughed. But every few minutes, his eyes drifted somewhere else. Emily noticed. "You've been doing that all evening." He looked up. "Doing what?" "Leaving." "I'm sitting right here." "No," she said softly. "Your mind isn't." Daniel stared at his plate. "It's just work."
She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Then leave work at work." "I'll try." She smiled. "I know you will." After dinner, they washed the dishes together. It had become an unspoken tradition years ago. One cooked, the other cleaned. Then they switched halfway through because Daniel always insisted he loaded the dishwasher more efficiently. "You stack plates like an artist," he teased. "I'm an architect." "Exactly. They're practically the same thing." He laughed. "No, architects get paid better." Emily flicked a few drops of water at him. He retaliated immediately. Within seconds, they were both laughing like college students. For just one perfect minute, there were no awards, no deadlines, no secrets. Only two people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Later that evening, Emily curled up on the living room sofa with a notebook resting on her knees. Every few minutes, she crossed out another sentence from her acceptance speech. Daniel sat in the nearby armchair, pretending to read. He hadn't turned the page in almost 10 minutes. Emily looked over. "You've read the same paragraph 3 times." He smiled without looking up. "It's a complicated paragraph." "No, it's a baseball biography." He laughed quietly. "You caught me." She closed the notebook. "Come here." He walked over and sat beside her. She leaned against his shoulder. "You know what scares me?" "What?" "What if I actually win?" "You've earned it." "What if everyone expects me to become someone bigger than I already am?" Daniel looked at her. "You know why people admire you?" She shook her head. "Because success never changed the way you treat people." Emily looked down. "I hope that's always true." "It will be." His voice carried absolute certainty. For a second, he almost believed it himself. Around 11, Emily finally fell asleep on the sofa. The notebook slipped gently onto the carpet. Daniel carefully picked it up. The final page remained open. At the top, she had written, "If I receive this award, it belongs to the people who never stopped believing in me." Below that, one unfinished sentence. And most of all, nothing else. She hadn't finished writing. Daniel looked at her sleeping peacefully beneath the soft glow of the living room lamp. He quietly unfolded a blanket and covered her. A loose strand of hair had fallen across her face. He gently brushed it aside. His eyes lingered on her for several long seconds. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She didn't hear him. He quietly walked into his home office, closing the door behind him. The room felt colder than the rest of the house. He placed the confidential envelope on the desk. His hands hesitated. Then he opened it again. The audience still couldn't see the documents, only his face, only the weight they carried. Suddenly, his phone vibrated. An unknown number. One message: "You're running out of time." Daniel's expression hardened. Another message arrived immediately. "If you don't tell her tomorrow, someone else will." His breathing slowed. He looked toward the closed office door. Beyond it, Emily slept peacefully, completely unaware that tomorrow would be the last ordinary day of her life. Daniel closed his eyes, then quietly said to himself, "I have to find another way." The room fell silent. Outside, rain began falling against the windows. Inside, the countdown had begun.
Friday arrived wrapped in brilliant California sunshine. For most of Los Angeles, it was simply another busy morning. For Emily Carter, it felt like the beginning of the biggest day of her professional life. She woke before sunrise, unable to fall back asleep. The acceptance speech still sat unfinished on her nightstand. She picked it up, read the final paragraph once more, then quietly smiled. No pressure,
she whispered to herself. Daniel was already awake. He stood in the kitchen making coffee, wearing a simple navy sweater instead of his usual business suit. "You beat the alarm," Emily said. "I've been awake for a while." She wrapped her arms around him from behind. "Nervous?" He looked at her reflection in the kitchen window. "A little." "I thought I was the only one allowed to be nervous." He smiled. "You learned from the best." For a few precious minutes, they shared breakfast without talking about work. No interviews, no deadlines, no awards. Just two people trying to enjoy an ordinary morning before life became complicated again. Emily glanced toward the wrapped gift hidden in the pantry. Tomorrow. She could wait one more day. An hour later, Carter Design Group buzzed with excitement. Television crews had already arrived to film a short feature on Emily's leadership journey. Studio lights filled the reception area. Cameras rolled. A producer adjusted a microphone. "Ready?" Emily nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." The interviewer smiled warmly. "People call you one of the most influential architects in California." Emily laughed softly. "I still feel like the newest person in the room." The crew chuckled. The interview flowed naturally. She spoke about teamwork, mentorship, community, never once taking credit for success that belonged to an entire company. Behind the cameras, Megan watched with quiet pride. "She's exactly the same person she was 10 years ago," she said to a producer. "That's rare." The producer nodded. "People can tell when kindness isn't an act." Across the city, Daniel sat inside his office, staring at the confidential envelope. It remained unopened. Again. His phone vibrated. Unknown number. No caller ID. He answered carefully. "Hello?" Silence. Only faint breathing. Then a calm female voice. "You don't have much time left." Daniel's expression hardened. "What do you want?" Another pause. "I want the truth." The line disconnected. He immediately called the number back. The automated message came almost instantly. "This number is no longer in service." Daniel lowered the phone slowly. Someone wasn't simply watching, someone was controlling the timing. Meanwhile, inside a quiet apartment overlooking the city, a laptop screen displayed dozens of photographs. Emily leaving work, Daniel entering the private office building, the awards venue, luxury hotel surveillance images. Every movement had been documented. A woman's hand quietly dragged one final image into a folder labeled Saturday. She leaned back in her chair. Her face remained hidden. Only her voice broke the silence. "It ends tomorrow." Emily's interview concluded just before noon. As the television crew packed their equipment, one young production assistant approached nervously. "Miss Carter?" Emily smiled. "Please, call me Emily." The assistant handed her a sealed white envelope. "A courier dropped this off for you a few minutes ago." "No return address?" He shook his head. Emily thanked him and slipped the envelope into her leather bag without opening it. She assumed it was another congratulatory letter from a client. She had no idea it wasn't. Daniel couldn't focus. He reread the attorney's instructions 3 times without absorbing a single word. His thoughts kept returning to the anonymous phone call. "I want the truth." Who knew? How much did they know? And why now? His phone vibrated again. This time, a photograph. No message, just an image. Emily, standing outside Carter Design Group only minutes ago, taken from across the street. Daniel's blood ran cold. Someone wasn't watching yesterday. Someone was watching today. Across town, Emily climbed into her car. Traffic moved slowly beneath the afternoon sun. At a red light, she remembered the envelope. Curious now, she opened it. Inside, one folded sheet of paper. No signature, no greeting, only one single sentence. Ask your husband where he was Thursday at 5:17 p.m. The traffic light turned green. Cars behind her began honking. Emily stared at the note for another second, then folded it carefully, placed it back inside the envelope, and drove away. She told herself it was a prank. She wanted to believe that, but for the first time, a tiny crack appeared in the certainty she had always felt about her marriage. That evening, Daniel stood alone in his home office. He looked out the window as rain clouds gathered over the city. Tomorrow, everything would change, whether he was ready or not. His phone vibrated one final time. Another unknown message. If she doesn't learn the truth from you, she'll learn it from me. Daniel closed his eyes. For several long seconds, the room was completely silent. Then he whispered, "Who are you?" No answer came. Outside, the first drops of rain began falling against the glass. Fade to black.
Saturday evening arrived with the kind of golden California sunset that made the entire city glow. Downtown Los Angeles shimmered beneath ribbons of amber light, while luxury vehicles lined the entrance of the Grand Regency Hotel. Inside, hundreds of guests gathered beneath towering crystal chandeliers. The ballroom buzzed with laughter, conversation, and anticipation. Tonight was a celebration. For Emily Carter, it was the moment she had spent 15 years earning. As she stepped through the grand entrance, flashes from dozens of cameras lit up the marble lobby. Reporters called her name. Business leaders stopped to congratulate her. Former clients thanked her for projects that had changed their communities. Every smile reminded her how far she had come. Yet despite all the applause, her eyes searched for only one person, Daniel. She checked her phone. Nothing. Not even a simple, "I'm here." A small knot tightened in her stomach. She quickly pushed the feeling away. Daniel had never broken a promise, not once. If he said he was coming, he would come. Megan approached with 2 glasses of sparkling water. "There you are." Emily accepted one with a grateful smile. "I was beginning to think the reporters had kidnapped you." Emily laughed. "They almost did." Megan looked around the ballroom. "Where's Daniel?" Emily glanced toward the entrance again. "He had to stop somewhere first." "Tonight?" Emily nodded. "He said he'd be here before the awards started." Megan smiled reassuringly. "He wouldn't miss this." "I know." Emily truly believed it. The ballroom lights slowly dimmed. A spotlight illuminated the stage. Soft orchestral music echoed through the room. The master of ceremonies walked confidently toward the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the California Leadership Excellence Awards." Thunderous applause filled the ballroom. Emily joined in politely, but her attention remained fixed on the entrance. Still, no Daniel. Across the city, Daniel's black sedan moved through evening traffic faster than it should have. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. The confidential envelope rested on the passenger seat, untouched. His phone vibrated. Unknown number. He answered instantly. "I'm almost there." The familiar female voice remained calm. "I know. You said you wanted to meet before the ceremony." "I did." "Then why are you calling?" Silence. Several seconds passed. Then she quietly asked, "Has Emily seen anything yet?" Daniel's heartbeat quickened. "What do you mean?" Another pause. "I hoped I'd be too late." "What did you do?" The woman sighed.
I waited as long as I could. Daniel's stomach tightened. Answer me! I sent her the photographs. Everything around him seemed to disappear. Traffic, engines, car horns, nothing existed except those 4 words. You... what? I couldn't wait any longer. You promised. No, she answered gently. You promised. Daniel slammed his hand against the steering wheel. You have no idea what you've done. Her voice began trembling. I know exactly what I've done. I've spent 12 years waiting to meet my sister, and every time I asked you, her voice broke, you told me tomorrow. The line went silent. Daniel whispered, Oh, God. Then the call ended. Back inside the ballroom, the presenter began introducing the finalists. Each name was met with applause. Emily smiled politely, answered quiet congratulations from the guests seated around her. Yet every few moments she glanced toward the entrance. Still nothing. She picked up her phone once again. Nothing. Then a vibration. A smile instantly appeared across her face. Finally, Daniel. She unlocked the screen. Unknown number. Her smile faded. One image loaded. Daniel standing beside the blonde woman outside Suite 1812. Emily frowned. Another image appeared. Daniel entering the hotel. Another, the blonde woman placing a hand gently on his arm. Another, the timestamp, Thursday, 5:17 p.m. Emily's breathing slowed. Another message arrived. Ask him where he really was. Then another. He wasn't working. Then another. He lied because the truth would destroy you. Emily stared at the screen. Her fingers refused to move. Every photograph looked authentic. Every timestamp matched. Every piece fit together, too perfectly. She wanted to believe there had to be another explanation, but her heart had already begun reaching conclusions her mind desperately tried to resist. Emily? Megan's voice sounded distant. You okay? Emily looked up slowly. Her throat tightened. I need a minute. She stood before anyone could stop her, walked past dozens of beautifully dressed guests, past the photographers, past the reception area, through the revolving glass doors. The cool evening air struck her face. She kept walking, not because she knew where she was going, because standing still suddenly felt impossible. She reached the quiet hotel courtyard overlooking the city skyline. The distant sounds of traffic drifted upward through the warm evening air. Her hands trembled. She opened the photographs again, zoomed in. Every image showed Daniel. Every image showed the same woman. Every image carried the same timestamp, Thursday, 5:17 p.m. Emily's breathing slowed, feeling tears forming. No, she whispered, this can't be real. The sound of tires suddenly echoed through the courtyard. A black sedan pulled sharply to the curb. Before the engine had even stopped, Daniel stepped out. He spotted her immediately, his face drained of color. For one brief moment, neither of them moved. Daniel slowly walked toward her. Emily. She didn't answer. Instead, she raised her phone. The screen faced him. He looked at the photographs. His shoulders fell. He closed his eyes for just a second. That single reaction told Emily everything she feared. Tears rolled silently down her face. So, they're real? Daniel opened his eyes. They are. Emily nodded slowly, as though trying to convince herself she had heard him correctly. They're actually real. Yes. She laughed once, not because anything was funny, because heartbreak sometimes sounds like laughter before it becomes tears. You lied to me. Daniel lowered his head. I did. The words landed harder than the photographs themselves. Emily's voice shook. Who is she? Daniel looked directly into her eyes, his own already filled with regret. Emily, please, no more lies, no more protecting me, no more tomorrow. She stepped closer. So tell me, who is she? Daniel took the deepest breath of his life. He looked toward the city lights, then back at the woman he loved. His voice barely rose above a whisper. She's the reason everything I believed about your life. He stopped, swallowed hard, turned out to be wrong. Emily stared at him. Confusion replaced anger for just a moment. What does that even mean? Daniel reached slowly into his jacket, pulled out the thick, confidential envelope, held it between both hands. I never had an affair. Emily didn't move. I know these photographs tell a different story. They do. But if I could go back, his voice cracked, I wouldn't change the meetings. I would only change one thing. Emily looked at him through tears. What? Daniel's eyes filled. I would have told you the truth the very first day I found out. Emily looked down at the envelope, then back into Daniel's face. For the first time since receiving the photographs, she saw something she hadn't noticed before. Not guilt, not fear of being caught, something else. Grief. The kind of grief that comes from carrying something too heavy for far too long.
Daniel looked down at the envelope in his hands. For nearly a week, those papers had felt heavier than concrete. Now, they felt impossible to hold. Emily wiped away another tear, refusing to look away from him. No more waiting, Daniel. No more protecting me. No more tomorrow. Tell me. Daniel slowly nodded. Okay. He carefully opened the envelope. Inside were several documents: a birth certificate, a DNA report, court filings, hospital records, an old photograph whose corners had faded with time. Emily stared at the stack. None of it made sense. Daniel picked up the birth certificate first. His voice was almost a whisper. 3 months ago, my father's attorney contacted me. I thought it was about closing the last remaining part of his estate. It wasn't. Emily listened silently. He told me another family had come forward. They weren't asking for money. They were looking for someone. Daniel slid the birth certificate toward her. They were looking for you. Emily frowned. What are you talking about? Daniel swallowed. The woman in those photographs isn't my girlfriend, and she never was. A long silence settled between them. Then, the woman you've been seeing is your biological sister. Emily didn't react, not because she understood, because her mind refused to process the words. My what? Daniel nodded slowly. Your biological sister. Emily stared at him as though he had begun speaking another language. No, that's impossible. My parents— Daniel interrupted softly. The people who raised you, loved you. They are your parents. They just weren't the people who gave birth to you. Emily took a step backward. No, my mother would have told me. Daniel closed his eyes. They promised they never would. Emily's breathing became uneven. Stop, please, stop. Daniel shook his head. I can't, not anymore. A quiet voice came from behind them. He told you the truth. Emily slowly turned. The blonde woman stood only a few feet away. Her eyes were red. She had clearly been crying. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't defensive. She simply looked heartbroken. For several seconds, neither woman moved. The blonde woman spoke first. My name is Claire. My name has never mattered. What mattered was finally meeting you. Emily looked between Claire and Daniel, then back again. No, this isn't real. Claire slowly reached into her handbag. She removed an old photograph. It showed two newborn babies sleeping beside one another in a hospital nursery. Each wore a tiny identification bracelet. Claire handed it to Emily with trembling hands. "I've carried this picture for 12 years." Emily looked down, her own face as a newborn, beside another infant. The resemblance was undeniable. Claire quietly unfolded another document, the DNA report. Across the first page, one sentence had been highlighted. Probability of full sibling relationship, 99.998%. Emily's knees almost gave way. Daniel instinctively reached toward her. She stepped back, not because she hated him, because everything she believed about herself was collapsing at once. "I don't understand," Emily whispered. Claire nodded. "I know. I didn't either. When my mother died, I found letters. They talked about another daughter, a baby who had been adopted. I spent 12 years trying to find you." Emily looked at the photograph again. You've been looking for me?" Claire smiled through tears. "Every birthday, every Christmas, every Mother's Day. I wondered if you were happy. I wondered if someone loved you. I wondered if I'd ever hear your voice." Emily's tears returned. "So, why? Why all of this?" Claire looked at Daniel, then back at Emily. "Because he kept asking me to wait." Daniel lowered his head. Claire continued. "Every time we confirmed another document, he'd say, 'Not yet. She has a big project. Not yet. She's overwhelmed. Not yet. After the awards.'" Claire's voice broke. "I believed him for months, but every time I asked again, the answer was always tomorrow." Emily slowly turned toward Daniel. He couldn't deny it. "I thought I was protecting you," Emily whispered. "Protecting me from finding out who I am?" Daniel nodded. "I wanted you to have this night, the biggest night of your career. I didn't want your entire world to change 48 hours before it happened." Emily looked down at the DNA report, then at the photograph, then at Daniel. "You made that decision for me." Daniel answered immediately. "I did, and I was wrong. No excuses, no explanations, just honesty." Emily took a slow breath, then another. She looked at Claire. "The photographs." Claire immediately shook her head. "They weren't supposed to mean what you thought." Emily frowned. "What?" Claire reached into her purse again. This time she removed several larger photographs, uncropped, original. Emily stared. In every hotel picture, Daniel and Claire weren't alone. The attorney stood beside them. A financial advisor stood beside them. Folders, documents, coffee cups. Nothing romantic, nothing intimate, nothing hidden. Just meetings, legal meetings. The photographs Emily had received were cropped so tightly the other two people had disappeared completely. Emily looked up. "Who cropped them?" Claire's face fell. "I did." Emily froze. Claire quickly continued. "Not to make it look like an affair. I only wanted you to recognize Daniel. I thought, if you knew he was meeting me, you'd ask him. I never imagined you'd think he was cheating." Claire covered her mouth. "I swear to you, I never wanted to hurt you. I only wanted him to stop waiting." Daniel looked at Emily. "I should have told you on the first day. I kept convincing myself, one more day, one more week, one more conversation. I thought I was protecting your happiness." Emily looked directly into his eyes. "And instead, you let me question everything." Emily looked at Daniel for what felt like an eternity. The silence between them carried every unanswered question, every sleepless night, every promise they had ever made. Finally, she spoke. "I believed those photographs." Daniel nodded. "I know. I believed every message. I know. I believed that on the biggest night of my life, the man I loved had chosen someone else." Daniel lowered his eyes. "I know." Emily wiped away another tear.
And the worst part was that I didn't even recognize the man standing in those pictures. Daniel took a slow breath. I stopped recognizing myself, too. I convinced myself that protecting you was more important than trusting you. I forgot something. Emily looked at him. What? You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. Silence. The words hung in the cool evening air. Claire quietly stepped backward. I think I'll leave. Emily turned toward her. No. Claire stopped. I've waited my whole life to meet you. Emily's voice trembled. So have I, even though I never knew it. Claire's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry. I never wanted your first memory of me to be this. Emily slowly walked toward her. She looked carefully at Claire's face. The same blue eyes, the same smile, the same tiny freckle beside her left eyebrow. For the first time, Emily saw pieces of herself in someone she had never met. I don't know you. Claire nodded. I know. I don't know if I can call you my sister. I know. I don't know what happens after tonight. Claire smiled sadly. I don't either, but I'd like the chance to find out. Emily closed her eyes. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Then, without saying another word, she stepped forward and hugged her. Claire immediately broke down. For 12 years she had imagined this moment. Nothing had prepared her for how it would actually feel. Daniel quietly turned away, not because he wanted privacy, because he couldn't stop crying. A hotel employee rushed into the courtyard. Miss Carter? Emily turned. We're so sorry. They've delayed your category as long as they could. The presenters are waiting. Emily looked back toward the ballroom, then at Daniel, then Claire. A few minutes ago, she had believed her entire life had fallen apart. Now, she realized it had simply become far more complicated. She smiled faintly. I should go. Daniel nodded. You should. She started walking toward the entrance, then stopped. Without turning around, she spoke. I'm still angry. Daniel answered immediately. You have every right to be. She nodded. But I'm angry because you didn't trust me, not because you stopped loving me. Daniel closed his eyes. I never stopped.
Not for 1 second. Emily looked over her shoulder. I know. Those 2 words meant everything. Not forgiveness, hope. Inside the ballroom, the applause echoed beneath the crystal chandeliers. Most of the audience never realized she had been gone. The presenter smiled warmly. And now, our final category of the evening. Emily quietly returned to her seat. Megan leaned closer. Everything okay? Emily looked at her, then smiled gently. It will be. The presenter opened the envelope. The recipient of the California Leadership Excellence Award is... A brief pause. Emily Carter. The ballroom erupted into applause. Everyone stood. Cameras flashed. Emily slowly walked toward the stage. Only minutes earlier, she had planned to give the speech she had rehearsed for weeks. Now, those words no longer mattered. She reached the podium, looked across hundreds of faces, then unfolded the speech. She smiled, folded it again, and placed it on the podium. I'm supposed to thank everyone who helped me build a successful career. Soft laughter filled the room. And I will. But tonight, I learned something far more important than anything I could have written on these pages. The ballroom became completely silent. As an architect, I've spent my entire career believing that beautiful buildings begin with strong foundations. She paused. This week taught me that people are exactly the same. From a distance, a photograph can tell one story, but when you step closer, you realize you were never seeing the whole picture. Daniel stood quietly at the back of the ballroom. Claire stood beside him. Neither of them moved. Emily continued.
The people we love will make mistakes, so will we. The hardest conversations are usually the ones we postpone because we think we're protecting someone. She looked directly toward Daniel. But love doesn't grow stronger through perfect secrets. It grows stronger through difficult truths. Several people in the audience quietly nodded. None of them knew the real story. Only 3 people in the room did. Emily smiled. So tonight, I'm accepting this award not because my life is perfect, but because I've learned that even when the foundation cracks, you don't always tear everything down. Sometimes you rebuild. The ballroom exploded into applause. Many people believed they had just heard the speech of their lifetime. Only Daniel understood. Every single word had been meant for him. Later that night, the ballroom had emptied. The photographers were gone. The music had stopped. Outside, the city lights stretched endlessly across Los Angeles. Daniel stood quietly near the hotel entrance. He wasn't sure if Emily would come. He wouldn't have blamed her if she hadn't. Several moments later, the doors opened. Emily stepped outside, still carrying the award. She walked toward him slowly. Neither of them spoke. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "I don't expect forgiveness tonight." Emily shook her head. "You shouldn't." Another long pause. "I can't pretend today didn't happen. I can't pretend you didn't lie." Daniel nodded. "I know. But," she looked down at the small gift bag she had carried all evening, "I also can't pretend I didn't see how terrified you were." She reached inside the bag, pulled out the wrapped wooden box. "I bought this for you." Daniel looked surprised. "You still brought it?" "I almost threw it away." She smiled faintly. "I'm glad I didn't." He slowly opened the box. Inside, the small handcrafted compass rested on dark velvet. Daniel looked at it silently. Emily spoke softly. "When I bought it, I thought it represented us." She gently closed his hand around it. "Now I think it represents something else." Daniel looked up. "No matter how lost we become, we always have a choice. We can keep walking away, or we can find our way back." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "I want to find my way back." Emily nodded. "So do I." She stepped closer. Not into his arms, not yet. Instead, she reached for his hand. Their fingers intertwined. Not because everything had been repaired, because rebuilding had finally begun. 6 months later, the first light of spring filled the Carter home. The Leadership Excellence Award stood proudly on a bookshelf. Beside it, the small wooden compass. Family photographs now filled the room. One showed Emily and Daniel hiking in Yosemite. Another showed Claire laughing with them during Thanksgiving dinner. The newest photograph rested in the center. 3 smiles, 1 family. Finally complete. Emily walked into the kitchen carrying 2 coffee mugs. Daniel looked up from the newspaper. "Morning." She smiled. "Morning." Claire knocked gently on the front door. Emily opened it without hesitation. "Come in." Claire laughed. "I brought breakfast." Daniel smiled. "You still bring enough food for 10 people. I've got 12 years to make up for." They all laughed. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was honest. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. Sometimes, the deepest betrayal isn't the lie someone tells. And sometimes, love isn't proven by never breaking. It's proven by choosing to rebuild one honest conversation at a time.